Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real-live bookseller, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
I'll tell a quick little personal anecdote. So I moved to New York a couple years ago from LA, boo, and then right after I turned 40, and whoever's 40 or up here, it is a sort of a landmark age in that very commonly you think, okay, well, getting older, what do I want to do that I haven't done yet, right? It's sort of like the bucket list age. So for me, I was in New York and I thought, I think I want to go to a vocal coach because I don't talk very loudly. I mention this because there's a microphone right here and it's still barely projecting me. So I thought, I'll go to New York. It's full of theater and Broadway, so they must have tons of vocal coaches. Probably someone like reasonably priced will tell me what to do. So I went to see a vocal coach. His name was Paul, like my friend over there. Very nice guy. And I stood there in front of like an old tiny microphone, like with the big circle. And I spoke into it for a while, and he had a monitor, and I was talking for a while. And then, to get the diagnosis, what's wrong with me, doc? And so after 10-15 minutes of the stuff, he stops me and he's like, okay, physiologically, you're fine. I was like, okay. By the way, not a doctor, whatever. And he goes, you're fine. And I said, okay, so is it posture? He goes, no, what you're doing is as you're speaking, you're just kind of trailing off. And really what it is you just don't care. I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. He goes, you just lose interest while you're talking, and you stop the sentence. So all you need, he goes, I know I'm talking myself out of a job. He goes, all you have to do is just either don't say it if you don't care, or just commit to the entire sentence. And once he said that, I noticed everywhere I went. I went to a deli, and a guy opened the door for me, and I kind of didn't want to say thank you. I don't know why. Maybe I'm an asshole. I just didn't. I was like, it's morning. I don't want to thank the stranger. So I was like, hey, thanks. And I just kind of did it. He's right. I just stopped caring. So now I barely talk to anyone. It's like the Tom Hanks movie Castaway. That's my dream. Just I could walk anywhere, not talk to anyone all day. So this is tonight. This is the most I'm going to talk all week. Let's live it up. All right. So I'm going to read a little section. This is a collection of stories. There's 9 stories, all very different. I would say the one theme that runs throughout them is envy. I think envy plays a big part in it. So I was trying to choose between which story to read. And I think I'm going to read the beginning of Venus and Fur because it's a story very much about envy. And if anyone's ever been in a love triangle, you'll appreciate this position. Also, if anyone has ever had a pet, so there's a dog plays into this. It's not a spoiler. Dog's first sentence. So here we go. It's called Venus and Fur. He recognized her instantly as his adversary. Despite the thin black lips bared in a replica of a smile, there was no mistaking Millicent for a friend. She circled George's ankles, sniffing and rooting, and then in a gesture at once defiant, indulgent, and confirmatory, urinated on his shin. Millicent, Helen chided. Bad girl, naughty Millie. Millie lowered her tiny head, revealing a white vertical stripe that slid through the toffee-colored fur with the ease of a loosed arrow. Helen scooped up Millie and rubbed their faces together. She's very sorry, Helen said. Millie glanced up at George. She blinked her bulging, unapologetic eyes. The absence of remorse stemmed from insight as much as imperiousness. Helen's version of scolding involved a half-dozen kisses on her lavender nose. It's okay, George said, shaking his pant leg. I hope it doesn't stain. A little scrub, they'll be fine. He plucked a sponge from the kitchen sink and waved it under the faucet. He was not put off by Millie's attack. Since the day children had cheered him on at 7 years old, while he dangled a shiny green cricket on his tongue, George had understood that being liked involved enduring some unpleasantness. Scooping up spiders, licking frogs, nibbling worms, these early adolescent acts later gave way to more complicated but equally undesirable concessions. What's that? Helen asked and went over to the fire escape. She gazed out beyond the collection of plants that expired on a semi-annual basis. "There's a big truck coming to get you." "Where?" George asked. "I was talking to Millie." Helen pointed out the window at a dumpster. Without her glasses, which she didn't wear around men, she had trouble identifying distant objects. "See that truck? See that truck?" Millie licked her neck. "She hates trucks," Helen whispered to George. "Oh no, is that nasty old truck coming for you?" Helen asked, crushing Millie to her chest. Except for the species disparity and 130 pounds, they could have been sisters. Helen, a petite, big-eyed strawberry blonde, and Millie, a runty Pomeranian, with freckles on the tips of her glamorous white paws, and eyes as glassy and spherical as soap bubbles. Helen kissed the top of Millie's head, assuring her that she was safe. "Don't worry, everyone wubs you, Millie." It was a performance resonant with the immoderate pride of the maternal. But in this case it was correct. Everyone did wub Millie. The dry cleaner and the hardware store owner fawned over her. The florist and the pharmacist yelped when they saw her. The pizza delivery boy danced with her. The cobbler crooned to her in Italian. The barber, bald and widowed, put down his scissors and sighed whenever Millie trotted past. Strangers on the street gawked at Millie. The bolder ones whistled or waved. Children followed until called off by their embarrassed parents, who blushed with delighted apologies. Even the cranky hip store bookstore cashier and the stern Israeli locksmith adored Millie. Only George did not love Millie. To be precise, he hated her. It was an antipathy that steadily grew over the next 6 months as he continued to see Helen and, by necessity, Millie. His animosity had little to do with the reasons he normally disliked dogs: their territorialism, their explosive and pointless vitality, the way they breathed hotly out of their mouths as if a dirty sneaker were being repetitively squeezed. It was simple jealousy. Watching the way Helen clutched Millie to her chest, the way she dotted Millie's small, furry skull with kisses, all that misguided, unconditional tenderness outraged him. A few days before he left for a 2-week vacation with Helen, George confessed this private hatred to the Greek Orthodox priest on East 13th Street. Elias was far from nonpartisan. He had often slipped Millie slivers of Cretan sausage, but George admired Elias enough to overlook it. Thin and hollow-cheeked, with an ecstatic dark beard and long black robes that seemed the attainment of stylish severity, Elias would surely understand the awkwardness of the imposition Millie made on George, the ethical confusion, all the troublesome et ceteras of a man struggling to secure love for himself in a skeptical, closed-hearted city. And if that failed, George could point out the way Helen cradled Millie in her arms as she walked the streets, like the Virgin Mary with baby Jesus, and in condemning this pagan perversion, George could win an ally. "You'd like to know how to ask Miss Carver not to bring Millie along?" Elias asked, after George had finished his plea. They were seated in the unventilated study in the rear of the church. The backs of George's knees were sweating. "Not quite. I want to know how to tell Helen that Millie isn't coming." "I don't understand. Didn't you just say she plans on bringing her?" "Oh, well, she plans on it, but she can't. I never went to the Greek consulate to have Millie's travel paperwork approved. And we leave Saturday morning. It's too late." Elias flipped a loop of red worry beads tucked into his palm. He looked bored with human nature. "We all make mistakes, George. Just tell her the truth. Our lives can be overwhelming at times, but people understand." George hesitated. "It wasn't a mistake. I had plenty of time to get the papers." "Well, my advice remains the same. Tell her the truth. You'd be pleasantly surprised by how forgiving—" "Yes, of course," George interrupted. "I think I should have been clear about what I'm looking for. I need practical advice. I'm only half Greek, but you're the real thing. You know the Greek consulate. You've got to have some idea about its bureaucratic workings and what a credible excuse might sound like." "Are you asking me to lie for you?" "No, of course not," George said and smiled. "I'm asking you to come up with a lie. I'll tell it." Elias ushered George out of the study. Beneath a bright golden dome, as extravagantly decorated as the tattooed back of a prisoner, the wooden pews sat empty. It was an early Friday afternoon in July, and too beautiful outside, it seemed, for piety. At the doorway, Elias pulled George aside. "Please remember that I'm always available." I don't think I'll be needing any more advice. For Millicent, I mean. Elias cleared his throat. Since you won't be taking her on vacation, you're going to need a reliable dog sitter. It would be no trouble at all to find room for her in my home. George returned to the post office and sullenly finished his afternoon shift. After work, he skipped the crosstown bus and walked to Helen's apartment. He was in no rush to give her the news. The sun was setting, sinking behind the river with the disarming and sudden acceleration of the end of things. When George arrived at her building, the doorman waved him past the front desk with indifferent recognition. George entered the empty elevator. Impulsively, he pressed all the buttons. The elevator stopped at every floor, announcing each arrival with a joyful, irrelevant ding. Then he was standing outside Helen's door, stripped of deferrals. "Guess what we're doing," she cooed, answering his knock. She was dressed in a cream-colored waffle robe that had been loosely tied. Her hair, pulled back into a ponytail, accentuated the size of her eyes. He could hear water splashing into the tub. "Taking a bath?" "Hurry," she said, and raced off toward the bathroom. He would tell her afterward, he decided, as he rushed through the apartment, undressing. He kicked off his black rubber-soled shoes and undid his belt, nearly tripping over his pants as he shed them in mid-run. He flung his shirt on the kitchen counter and tossed his socks over his shoulder. Ahead of him, at the end of the hallway, the bathroom door was swinging to a close. He hurried, excited by the thought of what awaited him. He imagined Helen sliding out of her robe and stepping into the water, her eyes drifting shut as she reclined against the supple curvature of the tub. She would lean her head back, the ends of her hair growing wet and dark. Hearing his footfall, she would slyly acknowledge his arrival by raising her bare knees up out of the water, twin islands parting in invitation. He stepped out of his last remaining article of clothing, dangling his boxers from his upturned index finger as he swaggered into the bathroom. "Why are you naked?" Helen said. Still dressed in her waffle-knit robe, she was kneeling beside the tub, inside of which sat a shivering Millie. Her caramel fur was matted to her bony ribs. With her dour, pointy face and pronounced whiskers, she resembled a satirical cartoon of a beat poet, missing only the beret and cigarette. "I thought we were the bath, that it was..." But he gave up, as Helen ignored him to further drench a scrawny, waterlogged Millie with a shower head. George pulled his boxers back on, one of the more disappointing activities known to man, and sat dejectedly on the toilet. Citrus-scented steam gusted against his face. He swatted at the fog with an annoyed wave of his hand. "No, no," Helen chided when the dog sneezed. "No getting sickies before we leave for vacation." "She's not coming anyway," George snapped. "What?" "The consulate was closed," he said, deliberately softening his tone. "Every time I tried, it was the same thing. Sorry. There's a reason Greece is the worst economy in Europe. No work ethic." Helen switched off the tap. She reached for a freshly warm towel and wrapped it around Millie. "I already took care of Millie's paperwork," she said. "What? When?" "Last Friday. You kept saying how hard it was, so I stopped by. Didn't I tell you?" But that wasn't the important question. The important question was, who took a bath? Helen screamed it twice, then segued into the equally urgent, who smells like oranges? Millie barked, raising her head excitedly into the air. You do, Helen said, her face exploding into rapture. She rubbed her nose against Millie's soaked neck. The dog squirmed free of Helen's embrace and headbutted George's legs. Then she ran out of the bathroom, trailed by Helen. George caught up to them both in the living room. Millie had found George's discarded pants in a pile on the floor and was rubbing her soaked hindquarters against them. "She hates the hairdryer," Helen explained. Millie sat up and rammed her head into George's bare shins again. Then she hopped up onto the couch and shimmied against a cushion. She barked at George with defiance, triumph, joy. All the world was her towel. Thank you. That's just the first part. There's more to the story, but that seemed like a good place to stop.
Hi.
Hello.
I am so excited to be talking to you about your gorgeous book. Your gorgeous book.
Thank you.
It's so lovely, and I just want to read. I want to mention that it got a starred review in what was it, in Kirkus,
Yeah, Kirkus.
Which is like the hardest, I don't know if anybody here is an author, but getting a star review in Kirkus is like the hardest thing on the entire planet. That's a
lot of pie.
Yeah. So much pie. First of all, that's one of my favorite stories in the book. I love so many of them, but I'm going to read my favorite quote from that story. This is at the end, but I don't really think it spoils anything. It doesn't tell you about all the fantastic adventures that happen. But I think this sort of sums up the sort of loveliness of Panio's book. If there is a mathematical model for loneliness, it is not an infinitely ascending line, it's a parabola. Is that how you say that? Okay, though often it seems that loneliness will never end, that it will only grow greater and more hopeless, at a certain point it catches, like the end of a pinned elastic, or the gang rush of the expanding universe, and comes hurtling back. This doesn't happen only once. Loneliness recurs, followed by fellowship, friendship, then more loneliness, more love. These acts of loss and discovery repeat themselves throughout a lifetime, a chain of parabolas, a wavelength that mirrors that frequency of the human heart. I just love that paragraph so much, and I really feel like it sums up all of the stories in here too, because you have so many sort of considerations about the minutia of domestic life and sort of the struggles with the day-to-day. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. Thank you for liking that part.
I love it.
That's my favorite part too.
Oh, good.
It's the reason I kept that story in there. The dog story is one of the oldest stories in the collection. I wrote these probably over a span of about 10 years, and half of them within the past 3 years, and that one's one of the oldest. And I really struggled, because in part, this is going to sound strange, but technology is just moving so fast that the stories start to seem like they were like 19th century, like the little newsies are going to be on the corner, because there's no texting in that story, right? There's no Facebook, there's none of that stuff. And so I thought, okay, I got to get rid of all the old stories because it'll feel very old-fashioned. But I did like that little bit, and I thought it's sort of an archetypal, triangle. But to your question, I am fascinated with the minutia of relationships and I guess the domestic sphere. I think I used to write stories when I was younger, in my 20s, that I thought I was supposed to write. I thought, okay, I want to be a serious writer, and I want everyone to think I'm awesome. So I'm gonna write stories where like horrible things happen, and like people drown in rivers, and like everybody just drinks a lot and crashes the car and stuff. And it was just like depressing shit. And not that those things don't happen, but it just felt like I was trying. I don't know. I mean, a lot of my friends here and people I don't know as well, I'm sure, are writers. And you just take your cues from things you read as you grow up, and you think, oh, that's what you have to do. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know. Something happened where I thought, I'm just gonna write stories about that I would tell a friend, just things that actually happen in real life, or similar to things that happen, and that requires like a sort of a laser-like focus on like all the little details of what's going on.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you would think that like a love triangle with a dog, it is sort of the minutia, and so many stories are about the sort of big thing. This is the day that, right. But your stories in this collection are really about how the tiniest thing can become a seismic event.
Yeah, and that's always, that's one of the big challenges when you're trying to write about the domestic, like the daily stuff. You can't write about the exceptions, right? You have to write about this stuff, because otherwise it doesn't feel like every day. It doesn't resonate. It feels like, oh, that one special moment. But then it can't be totally pedestrian and dull. Went to Starbucks, got a chai latte again, burned my upper lip.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
So it is, they have to move enough.
Well, yeah, because it's the moments where something happens or the characters are grappling with something. Like I'm thinking of the story I am a fever.
I'll be your fever.
I'll be your fever. Yeah. And where it's like this man who's struggled his whole life with all of his relationships with women, and then has this relationship with a person that is a of the female persuasion. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys.
Well,
it's his daughter.
It comes out really early on.
Yeah, it's his daughter.
Single dad and his daughter.
Yeah, single dad and his daughter, and all of a sudden he has to rethink everything.
But let's just be clear. It's just
not like
parenting.
that. Yeah, just
There's nothing here's going on. Loves his dog, chills him back. It's normal.
I set that up improperly. I know. No,
considering the current climate, let's be very clear. He's a good dad.
Yeah, he's a great dad. He's a great dad, but his framework for relationships to women is changed and marked by the monotony of having to parent a child, like the daily parenting.
And that one, a lot of the stories certainly originate from things I've thought or felt. And I remember one day, I have 3 kids, and my eldest, who's now 14, and forever another teenager. You know what I'm talking about. They're exhausting. I wrote this when she was younger and adorable, and I still loved her more than I do now. It's really diminished every year, and it'll come back. It's a parabola. I mean, we just talked about that. But when she was little, I just loved her so much. She was amazing, and she changed my life. I was like, she's incredible. And then when I wrote this, she was just entering this phase where she was starting to be a huge pain in the ass. And I thought, oh wow, I don't really want to be around my kid anymore. This is a problem because I have to continue to raise her. What if, because a lot of my stories are what ifs, like what if I didn't have a wife and it was just me and her and I'm just stuck with this kid? Like what do you do as your kid annoys you more and more? And then I thought, oh wow, what if you took a character who was always like sort of like squirming his way out of relationships with women, super fictional, and then you saddled him with this kid, and that's the one relationship you can never get out of, right? Like you can't just ditch your 7-year-old child, even if it drives you crazy. And I thought it's almost like a Greek myth, like Tantalus, who's where you're punished with like the thing you love, but it sort of tortures you too. And then so a lot of parents have talked to me about that story and said like they do understand. I mean, he loves her so much, but kids are exhausting.
Yeah, no, it's really just wonderful. Another thing that I think is really striking in all the stories here is that geography seems to be a big part of the sort of landscape of the narratives as well. In the dog story, there's here and also in Greece. But then there are other places where it's like it seems like half the stories take place on the East Coast and half the stories take place here. Yeah. But even with the one where they're running, like the landscape is a sort of part of it. Can you talk about how geography or place influences your writing?
Sure. That's one thing that I consciously do. A lot of the character stuff I just figure my way through it. Geography, that's a lot of that's in the second draft, where it's almost like a Beckett play. It's just like floating in space, and then I'm like, oh, this would be interesting if it existed in the world. And so as soon as you put it, if you put a story in LA, it's different than the story in New York, or those are the only 2 places I go to. So, the rest of the world just doesn't exist. Greece. Also Greece. So I do think about all the considerations that happen and how even like demographically, like is it going to be like a little suburban neighborhood? Is it going to be and all the considerations of it. It's something I'm dealing with right now because I'm working on a novel, and I've got part of it in Athens and part of it, get ready for it, in New York, part of it in LA. I know. But I thought, maybe I should move the New York bit to like somewhere else. Maybe I'll move to Chicago. But the problem is I don't know anything about Chicago. And I do feel like you can't fake place. For example, when I was writing, like I was 20 or 19, and I was writing about New York City, a place I'd never been to. I wrote about like this a restaurant on 13th Avenue. That would be in the middle of the river. That does not exist. I mean, that's a particularly embarrassing amateur mistake, but it's like that all the time. When you read something and you're like, you don't live there. So I do think about place, but I do feel like you have to know it really well.
Well, this is a good question. Okay, so
although you write about outer space.
I do write about outer space, but I actually became friends with an astronaut, and got a private tour of Johnson Space Center and got to interview the people who create the robots that are going to mine the asteroids and stuff. So I went to the source. Yeah, you did. I didn't go to space, but I went as close to space as I could, so that I could. I was going to ask about research, like what kind of. I just call people up. I'm like, you do this.
Or is it like, what's your hit ratio?
It's like pretty much 100%. I mean, I find that like anybody will talk to you about anything. I mean, the way that for me, for my novel Tin Star, I had a spacewalking scene, and I had a very important question, which was how would you tell somebody who was on a spaceship who had never been trained to walk in outer space to walk in outer space? Like if you had to be like, you gotta save yourself, put this spacesuit on and walk in outer space. Yeah. So I called this person, and then they hooked me up with someone at NASA, and I sent an email, and then I got an email from NASA saying, Rick Mastracchio is coming off the International Space Station in 3 days, and you have an interview with him. And I was like, what? Yeah, and he was like, at the time, the person who had the most hours spacewalking. Yeah. And so I asked him my question, and he answered it.
Did you end up using his answer?
I totally did. The answer, if you want to know, is if you don't know how to spacewalk in space, and you have to, go slower than you think. Because there's no friction in space, and so if you think you're going slowly, you're going too fast. So go very slow, and also always go sideways. Don't pull yourself up because your suit is very heavy, and you'll break your bones. So,
oh my God!
I mean, yeah, because like the weight is like it's like.
How heavy is the suit?
I don't know.
All I want to do is talk about space now.
I don't
Sorry, guys, that was fun. The story.
No, but let's go back to research because like now there's like so many ways to research. I mean, like, what are the things that you did research? And then I have like 50 million more questions.
Okay. I did like almost no research.
Well, I mean, you must have though. I mean, like you've been to Greece.
Okay, all right. So life research. I've been to Greece.
Do you have a dojo ever? Like you?
Okay.
Right, what some martial arts?
Yeah. Okay. I used to be the instructor at a dojo. So that was I mean, I definitely mind my own life for the research. The dog thing. I mean, my wife had a little Pomeranian, so I certainly know the joys of a Pomeranian. She actually, the dog this is based on, who was so sweet, to be fair.
Were you jealous of that dog?
I actually really wasn't. The interesting thing was my wife was a little jealous, and I can say that because she's not here to defend herself. But we went to Greece we did go to Greece with this little adorable little 4-pound puppy. Matt, you remember Suki, right? She was special. So we went to, and my wife, who is famous, and this is not name dropping because it's my wife and it's relevant to the story, suddenly knew what it was like to be me. Because we would walk and everyone would stare at the dog and nobody would look at her. And everybody would come over to the dog and just a little Greek girl, ran over and started screaming in Greek, top of her lungs, which is pretty standard for Greek people because we get very excited, and I'm the outlier. And then and my wife Molly said, well, what is the girl saying? And I said, she's saying, just translate, that she loves our dog so much that she would kill her dog just to please us. And she's like, no, I'm like, she's literally word for word. And so Molly's like, don't kill your dog, don't kill your dog. And the girl's like, I killed my dog. So Molly knew what it was like to watch. This is the biggest celebrity you've ever. This dog was just the island freaked out. Thank God this was before social media, because this dog would have an Instagram account and I would have a therapist. It would be all. Although I probably have a pretty good revenue stream too, so maybe it didn't work out. So all that dog stuff, that was real. I lived through it. I knew what that was like. I tend to steal. I'm very bad at making stuff up, making up little details. I just tend to notice things. I make a dialogue. That's really what I do, and then I just borrow from stories I hear and from friends and.
Friends are good for that. Just pluck their lives and be like, "Oh, that's messed up. I'm going to use that."
That is great. That's why it's really important when you're a writer to not have too many writer friends, because their material. You obviously can't use their material. That's my rule.
Well, I mean, you can't use their material, but sometimes I will say, "Oh, are you going to use that? Are you going to use that part of your life? Can I use that?"
Yeah.
I've definitely done that.
It's always important. I cultivate non-writer friends that I can just, like a vampire, just steal their content. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that anecdote.
Do you have people that come up to you and say, "Oh, I know this is about me," or does anybody ever get mad?
No, everyone assumes it's about me.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's like, "Oh wow, did I really?" I was like, there are multiple stories which contradict both within the timeline and psychologically. So no, they can't all be me.
Right.
But you know what the thing about that is? Every time I write, I invent so much. I'm always changing things, splitting parts off, making new characters, and then someone's like, "Oh, is that real?" I'm like, "No, it's 5% real, and everything else is made up." And then I read a novel, and I'm like, "Wow, did that really happen?" the bias takes me over anyway.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, she had a fucked up life. And it's all made up.
It's interesting. I feel like my reading is first of all a lot of comic books and young adult novels. But when I do read adult literary fiction, it's mostly women's fiction and like the domestic, it's either they're in outer space or domestic women stuff. And what I really loved about your short story collection is that I felt like it was a very manly. It's like it felt very man. I was like, this is a male book. This is very manly, but not in a way that was like I couldn't get it or anything like that. It sort of actually made me feel like I understood the sort of men's angst a lot more.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I felt like if I were a woman, this would be called women's fiction. But since I'm not, it's just it's just literary fiction.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah.
Because
it was male fiction. Yeah.
I do.
Which I thought was great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I do think that I've had a lot of friends, guy friends, who come up and say like, "Wow, the guys are really humiliated in these stories. You really put your characters in their place." I wasn't thinking about it like, all right, let's humiliate these guys. Their conflict, you can't help but have fun with it, and they also.
I think they're all. I think some of them are humiliated by the circumstances, but I wouldn't say that at all. I would say that I think maybe those people are projecting a little bit of their own stuff.
I didn't say it.
Because I definitely feel like, especially in the first story, what's the first story called?
Another Life.
Another Life, where it's like, the point of view is we're sort of closely following the woman.
Yeah.
And we feel kind of sorry for the man, but at the end, there's a sort of switcheroo that happens, and that, I don't feel like he's been humiliated at all.
No, not that guy.
Yeah.
Well, that was, that's the only one. Well, no, there's two stories with sort of female protagonists, and that's something I also worried about because I thought it was intimidating to write from a woman's perspective. I didn't want to get things wrong. Not that there's one perspective, but I don't know. What are you going to do? I can't just write men forever. I'm going to mix it up.
Yeah. I write boys sometimes. It just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. What comes first for you, the character or the story?
The character.
Yeah.
Almost always. One of the stories called Love and Heuristics is about a guy who's he's just not sentimental. He's not romantic at all, and it's kind of ruining his life. He bought. And that was based on a person I knew who bought his girlfriend or his fiance Valentine's Day chocolates on February 15th because it was 70% off. And she stormed into her house. She was furious. She was so mad. And he was proud of it. He wasn't like, "Oh, sorry, honey." He's like, "Hey, look at that, saving money." And she was enraged. And I thought, what is the rest of that guy's life like? That can't be the only time somebody gets mad at him. So I started writing a story thinking, what happens to him, and that leads into this thing where he creates an app to make him more romantic, and that kind of backfires.
I loved that story. I've also dated that guy. I did get Valentine's Day chocolate the day after once. I was like, what?
Yeah, I think it's better you just don't give the chocolate.
Yeah, just at that point, you didn't wait till next year to make that up,
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to open it up to questions? Or I've got questions as well, but but we can certainly open up. Does anybody have any questions?
And if not, we just go right
Yeah,
back
we'll
to
just keep.
Yes, in the back.
It's when writing from a female perspective, what was the most challenging aspect for you? Aside from getting it right,
sure.
Or even getting it right.
The most challenging part, so the story I wrote about her, and I'm not giving away too much because I think it comes up pretty early, is this woman, she's having an affair. And I wanted to write about how she felt, and I didn't want her to feel guilty. And I thought, how do I write about that so she doesn't come across as cold or super unlikable? I think if you have someone like a Don Draper character and you have him cheating on his wife and he clearly doesn't give a shit, right? You can kind of you chalk it off like masculinity or it's the times, or there's all these excuses you can make for him. Not that it excuses it, but people are ready for it. But with a woman, I thought people are going to just hate her. Like no one's going to be on her side. They're going to think, why doesn't she feel bad, or at least conflicted? And she's not conflicted at all. So for that story, I thought, how do I write her so she's still vulnerable and still seems complex instead of just like a cruel person?
I guess what metric do you use when you're finished writing a story like that? Do you just give it to your wife?
Yeah, do you have readers? That's
I have readers. My wife's my first reader, and she was really helpful with that story, actually. She had a lot of good comments. And then I gave it to a few other friends, and I didn't ask that specific question. I just wanted to see what they responded. And nobody actually had trouble with that. I mean, they had... and then a lot of the little details I get wrong. I'm terrible about like makeup application and clothing. Like I never know. There are authors that were really good about like she was wearing like a total da-da-da and thinking, I was like, I don't even know what these fabrics are. So, and I thought like, but you fall into stereotypes. Like, I'm like, should she notice this one's shoes? Like, is that important? Is that what women do? But then like if I do that, is that stupid? So I sort of had my wife just like check through it and be like, you didn't do anything too embarrassing.
And she's a writer as well, so like I have readers that help me with my grammar and things like that, and it must be nice to have like a partner who is also a creative person who can sort of be your first reader but not your only reader.
It is. It's also great just for those conversations you have when you're just like muddling your way through something and you're just like, I can't figure this out, and then very often she'll have like a great insight. It's like, well, why are you talking about this, and doesn't that make more sense? I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I should do that.
What's it like writing? You've been doing short stories for a long time, but you said that you're working on a novel. How are you finding that to be different? Because they're such different beasts.
So I like the novel. I like writing a novel in the sense that you're just more invested in the characters. You know the character's going to come back, and so that also takes a little bit of the pressure off. You can set things up more. Like I can put something in chapter 2 and know it's not going to pay off till chapter 5. Can't do that in a story. That's fun. The hard part is it's just really long. Sorry, novels just take a long time to write. Yeah, and you just kind of lose steam a little bit like, halfway through. It's like it must be like when you're running a marathon, which I've also never done. And suddenly you're like, do I want to keep going? Like nipples are getting chapped.
It's kind of like you're talking. You just get kind of tired.
That's the problem. I just lose interest. And then all your self-doubts come in, and there's part of your brain which is intended to protect you from things, but it's also like really good at keeping you from being happy. And it's just like, just stop. Just give it. Does anyone really care? Does anybody really care? Like, well, no, not really. Are you really going to make anyone care? No, probably not. Just stop. No one's asking. Just go to bed. Watch House of Cards. Go to bed. So that's just motivation.
But it is really satisfying though. Like I think what you're saying, where it's like, I mean, I've only done a few short stories, but like in a short story, it's like it's so you have to be so economical with it, and I mean that's what you do such a great job of in your book with the stories is that they feel like fully complex, like they feel like a full body wine, you know what I mean? Like, they don't feel watery at all. And, in a novel, I feel like you just have more time to sort of pause. And
you can reflect in a novel, which I really do like. I mean, I call them like flourishes, which is a little self-indulgent, but where I can just spend a half a page just talking about something. It's much harder to do that in a story. And you can do it like once in a story.
What's your favorite part, right? The first draft or revising?
Revising. I like the second draft. The first draft is a real struggle. The common advice, which everyone always gives, is write a shitty first draft and just burn through it. And I'm just incapable of it because I worry, again, this will never happen, but I'm like, what if I die in a car crash and they get my first draft and they're like, what? This is awful. You call it a simile? This is terrible. And it's like that dirty underwear thing, like you don't want to always. So those first, I'm always revising them, and then of course it's a waste of time because then you get to the second draft, and I was like, you know what? He doesn't need a younger brother. Chapters 2, 7, and 10 gone. So it's a little bit of a waste of time, but I can't get it out of I just can't help. At this point, I'm not going to change. So
yeah, well, I mean, you could though. I mean, I find that don't you find that each short story is it's like a different. It's like even though you know how you've done it before, it's always a different. It's like starting from scratch again.
It is, but there's something about emotionally about the process. For example, every story I write, and I guess probably every novel, there's always a moment, every time. It's usually halfway point, sometimes 2/3, where I think, oh God, I ruined it. It's like you're like yeah. Have you ever watched, if you have a little kid and they make a drawing, you're like, wow, that's really good. Wow, that's great. Oh, and the star, and then, oh, stop. You did it, and then they just like add stuff, and then like Pokemon. You're like, oh, it was really cool, and then you ruined it. I mean, you don't say that to them, but you think, you're like, that one's not going in the little box that you keep the stuff. That one's just the fridge and then the recycling on Sunday. So it's a little bit like that with the story. I get through it, I'm like, this okay, cool, and then I'm like, I screwed up. And I think, do I discard this story?
Right.
Is it destroyed? But then I have to go back and fix what it was.
But I feel like that's art, right? I mean,
Right, but it happens every time.
Yeah.
And every time it happens, I forget it happened before.
Oh my God, me too.
I'm like, what? And then that's where my wife comes in and she's like, you do this every time.
That's what my mom always says. When I call her crying.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, you're at this part in the novel.
Right.
And I'm like,
It's
what?
predictable.
No, this time it's real.
Yeah.
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 Other questions?
Yes.
Do you ever discard them?
I do. I do. That's one of the nice things about short stories is when you write one and it just doesn't work out, it doesn't hurt that much to get rid of it. I wrote one, the stories I've been writing since this collection are more magical realism, which is something I hadn't done in a long time, and it was fun, but I totally, like, one of them just flopped. I mean, I worked it, and I don't know how many drafts, and then it was done, and I thought, okay, I'm going to reread it, and then there's this, like, painfully honest part of my brain, which is like, it's like a B-. And then I thought, all right, it's just, you just know it, like when it doesn't have any special like vitality.
Yeah.
And that sucked because I spent all this time and I thought it was a good idea. But so I do discard them.
But do you feel like you learned something, like whenever I throw something out or I have an idea for a book that doesn't work out, like I feel like it gets me to a new place or a next place?
Yeah, you do learn from them. I mean, I figured out I was writing, I was preoccupied essentially with grief as a theme, and this story didn't fit, and I was sort of like inadvertently like bringing grief into it, and I thought, okay, I just need to take it head on in the next thing.
Any other questions?
Yes.
If you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Were any of these stories rejected by publication? And then, if so, how did you deal with that moving forward?
Yeah, some of them were, definitely. I think about half of them were published, and then, let's see, Venus and Fur got rejected, actually, the dog one. Good old New Yorker, gotta love him. I got mad, and then I just kind of like cursed out the editor for a while. I still thought it was a good story, you know. Usually when I get rejected, I don't send out a story unless I'm pretty confident in it. And because I've worked in publishing for a long time, I know that there's so much randomness. I know this sounds like I'm forgiving myself for failing, but it really is. Like I was an editor for a long time, and sometimes you would be in a position where you're like, okay, we need to buy 2 fiction titles for the spring list. We just need to. And then a bunch of books come in, and you buy books that like they're not that great, but you just need them, so you buy them. And then another time, like you're full up on books, like your list is overloaded, and a great book comes in, and you just let it go because you just don't need it. So that's some comfort to me to know that there are all these sort of external circumstances. But I mean, rejection hurts. I just got a story rejected a couple weeks ago, and I just I smirk like I like to think I look like Han Solo when I smirk. I'm like, but secretly I feel bad, and then about a day goes by, and I'm over it.
Did you revise them for the collection upon rejection?
No. I mean, I kind of revised everything a little bit, but not specifically in response to the rejection.
I'm going to ask a last question before we go to signing. How did you choose which stories of yours that you would put in the book? And how did you choose the published ones the already published ones, and how did you choose the new ones? So, yeah, there were a bunch of published ones I didn't put in. Part of it was that I wanted a balance of, for lack of a better word, it's almost like making a mixtape, right? You're taking someone through this thing. You know what that's like. I made a lot of mixtapes for me. And so, for example, one of the stories, Murmur, is about a younger guy. He's probably like 22, 23. And I wrote that when I was pretty young, too. And I wrote a bunch of stories, like 3 or 4 like that. And they all got published. And so and I thought they were too similar in tone and feeling, so I'm just going to pick which I thought was the most
emotionally complex one. And then I wanted there to be a feeling of progression, and then I wanted to end with a strong story, I'll Be Your Fever, which is probably the most redemptive, I think. So it was really just thinking, and not everyone reads the book in order, I understand that. In fact, I tend to read short story collections based on the shortest story first. So I just want to feel accomplished. I'm like, 4-page story, like, I'm going to knock that one out. But I did just pluck them out and think, like, this is the one. And then, and then I changed my mind, like 6 months before we went to print, and pulled 2 and put in 2 new ones I had just written because I just liked them more.
Well, thank you so much, Panio. Your collection is so beautiful, and you can go purchase the book if you haven't already. It's called How to Get Into Our House, Where We Keep the Money, which is the best title in the entire planet. Panio will be here, and but you can get your book signed. So thank you so much, and please give a warm thank you to Panio.
Thank you very much. You can also purchase Caesar's book, and she can sign too. So thanks everyone for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books Author Reading Series. Don't forget that you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.